Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 16th of May of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with Kiev. I believe you've seen already this video when the Ukrainians, according to their information, using the Patriot system were trying to shut down the Russians' missiles. And the Ukrainian military authorities are saying that as a result of that air defense work, they managed to shut down at least 6 daggers. Of course, it's up to you to believe or not this piece of information. From the other side, the Russians are saying that using the dagger missile, they managed to destroy one Patriot system. As you can see, updates are completely opposite to each other, and I believe that someone of them is lying. But if you ask my opinion, I have mentioned a lot of very interesting details that I would like to discuss with you during this video. First of all, as you can see, according to this video, we can certainly see that Ukrainians were using their Patriot system from the residential area. As you can see, there are a lot of buildings, civilian buildings where people are living and so on. And right from the middle of this civilian block, the Ukrainians deployed their Patriot system and were trying to shut down the Russians' missiles, to be more precise, the Russians' daggers or Iskanders. And I read today a very interesting article, and the thing is that, as you can see, the Ukrainians launched almost the entire ammunition of the Patriot. I believe that they launched every single rocket they had, and as you can see, the results are very poor of that work. And I read a very interesting article where one military specialist was saying that at some certain point of time during the previous night, the Ukrainians understood that they were not able to discover and to shut down the Russians' missiles. And according to this article that I've read, the Ukrainian sources understood that those missiles were heading in direction of Patriots and many other different types of air defense facilities and so on. And just imagine yourself, fully loaded Patriot that located in the middle of residential area. Imagine yourself the results of attack if the Russians using dagger were able to attack and to destroy that Patriot system. And now you need to understand that these massive launches of missiles from the Patriot is not the attempt to shut down the Russians' missiles or drones or whatever. The Ukrainians were forced to use up their ammunition, because if the Russians were able to hit the Patriot, fully loaded Patriot, imagine yourself the results and what kind of damage these missiles inside of this Patriot system could deal to the residential area around this Patriot system. So that was the reason of such a massive launches, even sometimes untargeted massive launches of the missiles from that Patriot system. And the Ukrainians understood at that moment that if the Russians were able to destroy Patriot fully loaded with munition, that could be a very big problem and a very great media victory for the Russians. So according to some sources, this is exactly what happened in Ukraine and in Kiev previous night. Another interesting updates are coming from, as usual, from Bakhmut, from Lugansk, from Donbass frontline, from Donbass arc operation. The Minister of Defense reported that Ukrainians made another attempt to attack Lugansk and DPR and LPR using the Storm Shadows rockets. As usual, for these purposes, the Ukrainians were using 2 airplanes. First one, Su-24, exactly the plane that were launching those missiles, and this Su-24 was under cover of Su-25, but the Russians are saying that they managed to shut down both of them. Furthermore, the Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of air defense work and so on during the previous day, the Russians managed to shut down 7 Storm Shadows rockets, 3 HARM rockets, and 7 HIMARS rockets. Of course, it's up to you to believe or not this information, but we need to discuss this just to understand the picture, the entire picture, and the global scope of the entire special military operation. Now let's go to Bakhmut, because we had a lot of very interesting updates from this town. As you can see, I have updated this map. And currently, according to Prigozhin, the Russians managed to capture and establish entire control over the Nest fortification. This is the Nest fortification. This one over the constructor fortification, this one, and we got this update, let's say a few hours ago, so probably even in the morning of the local time. So probably during the day the Wagners were trying to continue their offensive operation from the constructor and nest fortification to the south in direction of domino fortification. And I believe that this evening we're going to receive more updates from Wagner's about this. And furthermore, the Wagners were trying to develop their offensive operation in the northern residential area. So, of course, it's very important. But as you can see, even according to this map and most of the mappers that shows the disposition of the forces will confirm you that there are still a lot of forces, Ukrainian forces in this town. As you can see, even according to this map, we can find the special forces in the vicinity of Kromova, and their main job is not to allow the Russians to cut the last road of 506 that Ukrainian still uses for supporting of this area. Furthermore, we can find 77th Air Mobile Brigade in this area. Probably there are many other different special detachments, special forces like President Brigade. There are like special 9 separate rifle battalion and so on. And we understand that there are still a lot of forces and there are less and less territories that are under them control. So that's why they are forced to, let's say, to occupy and to keep their forces on much less territory that they used to do, let's say, tomorrow in the previous week. And it's the best situation for the Russians because currently they're able to attack this area like domino fortification, like southern residential area, and they will be 100% sure that anyway they will be able to get the target and to hit the enemy. And some sources are saying, and for example, today one of the ex-NATO officer published his own article about the counter-offensive operation from the Ukrainian side that the Ukrainians made since the 10th of May and until the 13th of May and something like this. And he reported that just during one day the Ukrainians lost up to 1,500 soldiers, and that's heaviest losses since the beginning of the special military operation per day from the Ukrainian side. And mainly he was talking about the southern area in the vicinity of Ivanovsk, and I'll remind you that this is the area where we can find the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov, 80th Air Assault Brigade and 5th Assault Brigade as well. But from the other side, some sources are saying that the Ukrainians launched their counter-offensive operation and it was pretty successful, not just on the flanks. And furthermore, the Ukrainians using the 24 separate assault battalions, I understand Aidar, and probably the Sheikh Mansour Chechen battalion were able to unblock the southern part of Bakhmut, this one in the vicinity, in the area of MiG-17 statue, this one. So probably they managed to restore control over this area. And as we can see for now, when talking not about the Russian flanks but the Ukrainian defense flank, we see that they managed to maintain the bridgehead, maintain the flanks, and to secure the passage roads for the Ukrainian forces that are currently blocked in the western part of Bakhmut. Furthermore, this information we can find, the confirmation of this information we can find also on the Institute of Study of War map. This map shows that as a result of counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to restore the bridgehead in the square and the street in the vicinity of MiG-17 statue. But if you remember, during the previous week, when the Ukrainians were retreating from this bridgehead, while the Russians counter-offensive operation, they destroyed most of the big buildings in this area. So probably they're not going to hold this area for a very long time, and more military experts confirms and agrees that all these attacks from the north and from the south was made just with one purpose: to allow the Ukrainians who are currently blocked inside of Bakhmut to retreat from this area, to step back, and just to save as much as possible forces. I'll remind you one more time that when talking about the central part of Bakhmut, the western part of Bakhmut, there are Wagner forces in this area who are currently storming this area. When talking about the southern flank, mainly there are 40 separate motorized rifle brigade in this area from the Russian side and 72nd motorized brigade. During the previous day, the 72nd was forced to step back under the pressure of the 80th Air Assault and 3rd Assault Brigade. And when talking about 4th Brigade, this brigade was awarded and the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation paid attention to this brigade. There is a fierce fightings. They are not stepping back, and this is another legendary brigade from the Russian side. When talking about the north, the situation in this area has come down. There are no more changes. I'll remind you that, for example, the area between Berkhovka and Yahidne is under protection of 200th motorized brigade, and this entire area on the north is under protection of the 6th motorized division. And of course, Prigozhin, he took a decision maybe even to slow down the pressure in the western part, but to move some forces of Wagner's to the flanks and just to be on the safe side and to secure the Russians' forces of main forces of their backs. So this is the situation. One more time, there are still too many Ukrainians and there are still too many jobs to do. But as I understand, and most of you expect that within the next few days, probably Bakhmut is going to fall if the Ukrainians don't have any solutions how to break the situation and how to return control over the Domino flank and something like this, and constructor. The most powerful fortifications have fallen. So there are just few streets, and probably maybe the Ukrainians have already started the retreat process. Furthermore, for example, today some Ukrainian soldiers published a video of some kind of withdrawal of their positions from Khromova. There was a video of that. So the Ukrainians have already started using the roads to step back from this area. One more time, for example, the Ukrainians, when attacking to the south on the positions of a separate motorized rifle brigade, the Ministry of Defense reported that that brigade managed to repulse 10 attacks during the previous day. So imagine yourself the level of Ukrainian pressure and of course the level of losses. So it's a terrible battle, and soon this battle is going to over. Another interesting updates are coming from the south area, from Marinka and from Donetsk front line. The Russians reported that they managed to break the situation in Pervomaiska, in this town that located on the east from, let's say, on the northwest of Donetsk. They managed to get more blocks, but it's also just minor changes without significant success. Just a small progress and other steps in direction of, let's say, of Pokrovsk or something like this. Very interesting updates are coming from Marinka. The Ukrainian sources confirmed that they took a decision finally to get the 79th Brigade from the ruins of Marinka, because the Ukrainians were trying to hold this town maybe since the beginning of the special military operation. Currently, there are no area where the Ukrainians can have their positions, fortifications, and now it's too dangerous, and now the Ukrainians need to pay too big price for every single day of holding Marinka. Basically, it is much more better and easy for the Ukrainians to step back this area in direction of Georgievka. I believe that during the previous year, the Ukrainians managed to create another fortification area, and with the same speed and the same direction, the Russians will gonna need another year to develop another few kilometers to the west in direction of Kurakhova. So with this speed, with this tempo, we are going to see the Battle of Kurakhova not very soon. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that during the previous 24 hours, the total losses of the Ukrainians on the Donetsk front line was around 250 soldiers, 12 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems, Tabi and D-30 howitzer. When talking about South Donetsk and Zaporozhye area, the front line is stable. There are no changes on the ground. There's just the process of accumulation of forces from both sides. For example, the Western sources are saying that the Russians managed to accumulate up to 200,000 soldiers in South Donetsk area. Imagine yourself. Some sources are saying that currently there are around 400,000 soldiers on the territory of Ukraine, and 200,000 of them are located between Kherson and, let's say, Ugledar. So half of the entire army. So another half is located, let's say, from Donetsk to Kupyansk. And from one side, this is a very nice step, because currently the Russians are sure for 100% that they're able to repulse any attack in this area. But from the other side, we understand that, for example, Kupyansk front line is less fortified, is less protected from the Russian side. And when talking not about Kupyansk, but about the entire old Russian territory, there were a lot of rumors and a lot of talks about possible attack from the Ukrainian side on the mainland of Russia. We'll see what is going to be next there. The Ministry of Defense reported that the level of losses and the intensifying of clashes have been increased in this area, and during the previous 24 hours, according to the MOT report, the Ukrainians lost 135 soldiers. As you can see, the losses have been increased, and everybody expect more movements and more intensifying of activity on this front line. When talking about Kupyansk and Lyman, there are no changes. Lyman front line has been stabilized. As I understand, the Russians stopped any attempts to develop their offensive operation in direction of Bilogorovka. Currently, it's too difficult to do this. Currently, the Ukrainians control the hills. It's 81st Brigade, 54th, 58th, and they control the hills. They control the Serebryanka forest along the Seversky Donetsk River. So currently, highly unlikely the Russians are going to start movement in this area at least until Bakhmut falls. And when talking about Kupyansk front line, the intensifying of fightings have been reduced. If you remember, during the previous weeks, there were a lot of updates about clashes. The Russians managed to establish control over a small village, Masyutovka, and they managed to cross Oskol River and to prepare a bridgehead on the Ukrainian side of Oskol River. We still haven't received any updates or reports from the Ukrainian side that they managed to repulse and return control over that bridgehead. Probably this area is still under the Russians, and starting from today, the level of loss of the Ukrainians have been reduced till the minimal last level, and I believe that after the Russians captured that bridgehead, after the Russians captured Masyutovka, they took a decision to reduce the pressure, to make regrouping, and probably currently the Russians took a decision to use defense state and to wait and to see what the Ukrainians are able to do in this area. Probably they have established the needed fortifications, roads, supply roads, and we'll see what is going to be next in this area as well. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.